y'all. I bet you think Scrum is easy because that's what it says on paper. But Scrum is very complicated in real life. So let's dive into a very high level overview of what Scrum is, what Scrum isn't, and who are the players in today's episode. So, again, I'm Adrienne Streeter, the CEO and founder of Velocity PMO, and this is our podcast, The Velocity Playbook. So, if you watched my first episode, you know that um, I like to just keep everything natural. I like to speak from my heart to you so that it's best that it's a natural conversation. But your girl has notes. I keep notes and I got them all over here. So if you see me every now and again taking a peek at my notes, trying to make sure that I'm taking everything that's in my head and giving it to you the best way I see fit, that's why you'll see my eyes kind of dart all over the place. But let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. We're going to talk about something very basic, Scrum 101. So I know you all have heard that term a lot, Scrum and Scrum Master. So a Scrum Master, as I kind of described previously in the first episode, comes from rugby. So if you're familiar with the rugby sport, which I'm not, it's kind of like the American football in some ways. Um, in rugby, what happens is when you are about 10 yards or so from scoring a goal, the team will lock arms and use the momentum of the team to scrum forward, to push forward, to get us across the goal line, to get us to the finish line. And the scrum master is the person that's directing the team to get across the scrum or to get across the goal line. And in technology, the scrum master on paper is a really cool coach. In reality, we're so much more than that. We're always looking forward thinking about where the team is now. What happens after we complete getting across the goal? What happens if we don't? It's a lot of planning, execution, communication, navigating, and so much more. But in today's episode, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what Scrum is, what it's not, and who the players are. We may even dive a little bit into artifacts and understanding that, and that may end up being an episode in and of itself. But today, we're talking about what Scrum is. So Scrum is a part of the Agile framework. It's a light work framework that simplifies delivery, meaning when I say simplify, we're learning fast, we're adapting, and we're changing within just a very small amount of time. Some people have what's called a 1 week sprint. I've been on teams where we've had 1 week sprints. Standard is 2 weeks. Some people have 3 weeks and some people have 4 weeks. Those are longer sprints. And those are for different projects, I will say. But for the most part, 2 weeks is your standard time to sprint. And sprint, just like that, if you're thinking of track, you're working and going as fast as you can. It is not a marathon. You're not a marathon runner. You're not running the long distance and setting a consistent pace. That's not what a sprint is. A sprint is putting all of your energy from the very onset until you cross the line. And so typically a sprint is 2 weeks in time frame, and your team is putting all of their energy and their effort into what's been planned out by the key players that we'll talk about later in this episode, what's been planned out to be delivered at the end of that sprint. Now, There is another methodology. There are many methodologies, but there's another methodology that was common for a very long time called waterfall. And if you think of a waterfall, depending on where you've seen it, it literally comes off the edge of a cliff and it comes straight down into a pool of water. Um, the waterfall method, you're coming off of the edge of the cliff, you're gathering all of the momentum, and you're going into the next pool of water. And then that's gathering all of the momentum. It's going off of the edge of a cliff, going into the next pool of water. And so in the waterfall methodology, you're constantly waiting for everything to collect at least until this pool is full to spill over into the next. You plan, 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 then you may start to execute later. That requires a lot of meetings, a lot of planning, a lot of conversation early on before any actual work is done. Scrum is not like that. Scrum, again, quick and fast, but it doesn't guarantee speed. It just guarantees the ability to build, break, repair fast. In a perfect world, and the reason why I mentioned waterfall, in a perfect world, after every sprint, theoretically, you would release to your client, and they can determine whether or not it's working for them. You get immediate feedback if that product is working for them. Sometimes there's a blend of coming out of a waterfall mindset, and you don't release every sprint. You may release after a set number of sprints, which kind of is a little bit of a waterfall ish kind of methodology where you're holding on to a certain amount of work before you release it into production. So that's why I mentioned waterfall earlier. Um, both methodologies work, but we're talking about Scrum. We're talking about uh, our 2 week sprint where you have established all the separate ceremonies, which we're not getting into in this specific uh, conversation today. We're talking generally about what Scrum is, what it's not. It's not waterfall, and who the players are. So when I think of Scrum, definitional from the definition standpoint, your Scrum team is your Scrum Master, your development team, and your testers, your QA, your quality assurance testers. Um, some people, some projects that I've worked on, they like to have their BA, their business analyst, because your business analyst is the person that will write the stories, meet with the client, gather the information, the requirements, and what they are presenting to the development team is what gets developed in alignment with the product owner. The product owner is just that. It is a person who typically is part of your stakeholder, your client team, and they know the product typically. And that person is going to be responsible for planning out the execution of the delivery of what it is the client wants done. Whether it's new development of software, modernizing software, revamping, whatever it is, keeping software going, whatever it is, the product owner is that person that has a vision, and the product owner owns the backlog. They will partner with the Scrum Master, with the lead developer or architect, as well as the BA, to have ongoing conversations about priorities and what needs to fall where based on your roadmap. So your product owner is very, very key. Some projects that I've been on, they don't have product owners. And that's where understanding the role as a Scrum Master comes in. Because now, as a Scrum Master, you may have to be the product owner and wear that dual hat. And what does that look like for you? And what does that feel like? Do you have one-on-ones with your lead developer, your architect, and your BA? Do you have PI planning? And that goes into, again, a new methodology, SAFe, to talk about where you are, what impediments, dependencies, and risks that this project may have on other projects. Do they overlap? Is there anything that is dependent upon your team getting something done so that the next team can function? So a product owner is a very important role, but your Scrum Master is the mastermind behind all of this, especially if you don't have a product owner. Your Scrum Master may be playing dual roles. If your Scrum Master is not playing dual roles and your Scrum Master is simply a Scrum Master, your Scrum Master is the person that is going to work very closely with the key players, from the stakeholder to the product owner, to your architect, to your lead developer, maybe even your senior developer, to your lead BA, to your lead QA, your UAT manager. And we'll talk about some of these terms and who they are. Your Scrum Master is visually keeping abreast of everything that's happening. I personally, as a Scrum Master, I like to sit in on as many meetings as possible, because that helps me, and this is a whole different episode around communication, that helps me close the gaps, especially when you're working with the client and they don't realize how siloed they are, how communication is being stifled and not being shared. As the Scrum Master, when I'm able to sit in all of these various meetings, I might hear something that happened in one meeting that wasn't brought up in another meeting, and I'll step in and interject and say, wait, hold on, I was in a meeting yesterday and this was said. How does that relate to this? And that actually helps the project. So as a Scrum Master, even if I'm not facilitating the meeting, I like to make sure that I'm a part of the meeting so that I can make sure information is still flowing and keeping the project where it needs to be. Outside of the product owner and the Scrum Master, who is keeping the glue together, you have your developers. Your developers are very key because they are going to be the ones to develop the software, the product that the client wants. They're responsible for the quality of work that is being produced. That is their sole responsibility. They have to work in hand in hand with the product owner to make sure that the vision is being aligned and that they're not going rogue and creating a product that is not the vision of the client. So the design team, the developers, shall I say, sorry, the developers are very important, obviously, to the flow of having an agile team. You also have, I kind of mentioned the BA earlier, your business analysts. Although some teams include the business analysts, I've been on teams that don't. And it varies how you manage those teams. But the business analyst may or may not be a part of your Scrum team, especially on paper. They're not part of the Scrum team. But I like having a business analyst around because we can not only partner with the business analyst to influence how they understand the software, how it is desired to function, but where the direction we want the project to go. And so that helps the business analyst walk into meetings with the client and guide those conversations. So I like having the business analysts as part of the Scrum team. Technically, on paper, they're not, but there's benefits to having the BA as part of your Scrum team. It just is. At least I've seen that to be the case. I've also, again, like I said, I've worked with teams where the BAs were separate and had no relationship whatsoever. They just delivered their product and our team picked it up and we worked it. That has its pros and cons as well. But the business analyst is there to kickstart, I'll say, in some ways, the Scrum cycle. All right, so we're going to skip over the developers and jump all the way over to our QA testers. So our quality assurance testers are testing what's in the story. Does it function the way it's designed to function? And they are there to determine whether or not there are any bugs in the software. So our QAs are going to be responsible for the testing the quality of work that the developers have developed. Their role is so vast. I love working with QAs that are passionate about their role because you can see their eyes light up when they may find a bug or find an issue in the software. And then that takes the project to another level because, again, the QA has a different way of thinking than sometimes the BA or even the developers, and their input into certain meetings is always key. They are going to be responsible for making sure that what's been created functions the way the client sees it based on how the BA has presented that information in the user story and the way it's been developed. And so they're going to test it, make sure it does what it's supposed to do, and make sure that it is ready to go to market. So your QA is a very, very important team. They also, not to get into the weeds and regression testing and different terminologies of that matter, but they also identify and solve problems of where the developers may have caused bugs, may have lapsed in their development and caused gaps. So there's a lot that the QA team is responsible for. And so again, quality assurance testers. You also have some automation testers, but we're sticking solely to the team of Scrum. So those are some of the roles that are key to your Scrum team getting their 2-week sprint done. There are additional roles, as I kind of mentioned earlier. You have a UAT, a user acceptance testing. This is when you've now pushed all of your work, whether it's in a release package or you're doing it releasing after every sprint. However your team has it set up, you have a UAT manager where they are constantly testing what is supposed to work for the client, and they are writing up real life examples of how the client anticipates using the product. They're getting the client to test the product to make sure it reaches or matches their ideal of what the product should be. And then from there, it goes into production. There's a little bit that's been missed, obviously, from a high level standpoint, but those are going to be your key players in the flow of getting software developed from the very onset all the way out the door to something you see and you use, or something the client sees and use if it's an internal software. So again, Scrum, what it is and what it's not. Scrum is a development team, a Scrum team. using the methodology to deliver work quickly, efficiently, learn from our mistakes, those that we do find along the way, and start that cycle again. Work quickly, efficiently, develop, get it out to market, figure out what we did wrong, change it, and keep that cycle moving so that we can get a full product out before the client's eyes, instead of having to wait months, if not years, um, to say, "Hey, here's a product that we developed," and then receiving that feedback from from the client, and that being the first time they see it, feel it, touch it, and they're like, "This is not quite what we envisioned," and all that time has now gone to waste. So, with that being said, again, it's a methodology used to make sure that you can work quickly and efficiently. Your key players, again, depending on your makeup, if you're going to include the business analyst or not, but some of the key players can be always a product owner, a scrum master, a business analyst, your developers or engineers, whichever choice of words you choose, or QA team. That's going to make up your team of Scrum. I hope this has been helpful. Put some comments below. Tell me what your thoughts are around this in terms of what types of Scrum teams you've worked with in the past. Have you, as a Scrum Master, been a Scrum Master? You might even have been a UI UX person as a Scrum Master. We'll get into that role later as well. So tell us in the comments what kind of teams that you've been on in the past and what's worked for you and what hasn't worked for you. And I hope this quick overview of what Scrum is, a little bit of one-on-one, and what it's not, who the key players are, was helpful for you. Please feel free to leave any comments below, and I thank you in advance. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We drop content every week, so thank you for being part of the Velocity Playbook. Take it easy, team.